So I wanted to close tonight, just kind of walk through some of the things that Bill did work on as the Congresswoman just spoke of. And it was a passion for him. He saw problems and he fixed them. And that's what, again, I loved about Bill. As I mentioned earlier, he was a person who stayed out of the limelight. He didn't really care about who got the credit, but he wanted to just go out and solve problems. He was, again, a mechanic at heart. And one of those issues, as Congressman Washington Schultz talked about, was the Indian River Lagoon. This is a lagoon that historically has had challenges, and Bill was passionate about taking on this. And one of the issues where he did, again, work across the aisle was what he created with members of the other side of the aisle on the Estuary Caucus. That is where we're focused on solving the problem, where it's not just happening in our home state, but around the country, how we can clean up our rivers that eventually work into our oceans. And it was mentioned with NASA, again, a champion for NASA, not just because he represented the area, but he literally worked on the Apollo program. And it was something that he knew would bring America together, even in the most partisan of times. And before entering politics, he was a person who, after leaving his work at the Kennedy Space Center, went into the real estate business and found tremendous success. But he was willing to put aside that incredible economic success for his own family because he wanted to serve this country. That's why he entered public life and left a lot of, candidly, let's just say, resources on the sideline because he chose to serve in public life. But he was known as Mr. Fix-It. And I'll be talking about this at his celebration of life on Saturday in Melbourne. But one of the issues that what really separated him, as Congressman Washington Schultz talked about on some fronts, but was everybody remembers the election of 2000. That was the year where we had the hanging chads. And of course, that incredibly razor-thin election where Florida would decide the election. And candidly, we were embarrassed at what happened in the election of 2000. And so when people looked around the room in the Florida House and Florida Senate, and when Jeb Bush was governor, they said, who are we going to bring in to fix the election laws in the state of Florida? They brought on Bill Posey. And if you haven't noticed, guess who's running the best elections right now in the entire country? The state of Florida. I remember just when I was elected last November 2024, within 7 minutes, we knew not only who won the election, but almost all the results were in after the polls closed at 7 p.m. in Florida. That's how remarkable, that's how efficient we want it to be. Counting those early votes, counting those absentee ballots, and then once those ballots were tabulated, within minutes, you knew the verdict. Very different from what we're seeing actually right now in some states. That was who Bill Posey was. He saw a problem, he wanted to fix it, and he never talked about it again. That was the ironic part about it. Here was a person who should be known around the country for fixing elections in a positive way and getting the tabulations done quickly and correctly. And that's what we need more of in America, is a problem solver like him. Also was mentioned as being on the Financial Services Committee. When I was thinking about what committees to serve on as I now enter Congress, I went to him and I said, where was your passion? He said, Mike, I held out for one job, and that was to be on financial services. He really felt like some of the banking laws in our country needed common sense reforms, and he worked all 16 years on the Financial Services Committee. So many people saw his work with NASA, but as French Hill, our current chairman, talks about, Bill Posey was always diligently there, pushing for the idea of transparency. Because through the years, we've seen horrible situations, whether it be Enron or, of course, the housing market crash. He was focused on making sure when people put those dollars in banks or in investments, that there was more transparency, so that the investor actually had the information in front of him. That was the kind of person he was. And I'm just so grateful that his colleagues who served with him for so long showed up tonight, because it was that work behind the scenes that really made a difference. And what I saw firsthand in our 25-year-plus relationship was that it was always remarkable watching Bill, a tried and true financial or fiscal conservative, be willing to listen to whoever came before him. He was a person who said, you don't have to, you can disagree without being disagreeable. And that's what I loved about him. He could be a little cantankerous at times, but he always took the time to listen. And as I mentioned, and I'll mention again over and over, he never left Brevard County. Whenever he could get out of Washington, he got out of Washington. And he and Katie loved to get back home and be around the people they loved most, especially their daughters, Katie and Kathy. And after he left Congress in 2024, after those elections, he spent really the last 18 months being involved in those passion projects. One of those is he was actually involved in a car rally across the country as he and Katie went around the country. And I'm still amazed that they actually did it because it was a challenging race, but he had such a passion for cars. And I remember we even went to New Smyrna racetrack for the Governor's Cup many years because he just loved stock car racing. That was his passion and was in his blood. And most recently, of course, he spends so much time with his grandkids, whether it be out west in California or in Alabama, and spending a ton of time with his daughter, especially those who live in Brevard County. He was a guy who put family first, and it wasn't a cliche. And he was a person who, again, was passionate about things when other people took passion in those same ideas. And I'm just so grateful that I had the opportunity to know him for so long as he served our country so ably. And he gave back so much and took on so many financial challenges because he loved this country so much. And Mr. Speaker, of course, I would like to ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to which they can revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the topic of this special order. And so as I close, and before I yield to our friends on the other side of the aisle, Bill Posey will not be forgotten because he never forgot those folks who gave him this opportunity to be here. And I'm looking forward to seeing so many friends back at home on Saturday as we celebrate his life. I was with him, sadly, that Thursday before he passed on the Saturday, and to see the love that his family expressed in those days as they know they were going to leave him for a period of time. It just shows the commitment that his family had for him because he loved his family and he loved this country. And I'll try to leave it on a lighter note. I remember he said to me when I got elected to the legislature, he said, "Mike, I remember when I was first elected to the legislature and I couldn't believe I was in the Florida legislature. Here was a guy from Rockledge, Florida, who grew up loving cars and space and had a beautiful family and a young wife. And then he said, after about a month or so, I couldn't believe how these other people got here." That was the thing about Bill Posey. He had that wry sense of humor, as Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz spoke of. And so with that, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for the opportunity for us to speak about our good friend Bill Posey. He'll be dearly missed, but he's a true patriot and friend to our community, and I know I have very big shoes to fill here in the United States Congress. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.